For our Google 20, we are proving how horror movies are an art form and will be analyzing the historical significance of many horror movies throughout the ages in the following video essay.
The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, considered to be one of the first horror movies, was conceived in post-World War I German society. The entire movie centering off a power-hungry killer, Dr. Caligari, who controls his employee, Cesar, into killing for him. The movie is interpreted as portraying the common man who, under the pressure of compulsory military service, is drilled to kill and to be killed. The revolutionary aspect of the story becomes apparent in the end, when Francis and reason overpower the insane authority of Caligari. This movie is a metaphorical time capsule of German post-war society and is a nightmarish representation of how World War I had affected society at this time.
In the film The Wolfman, screenwriter Kurt Siodmak fails to receive his due credit. A German Jew who fled his native country as Adolf Hitler came to power, Siodmak used the pentagram star as a parallel for Nazis labeling Jews as their intended victims, just as the Wolfman sees the pentagram appear on his future prey.
View of watching my own destruction take place. There isn't any danger until
Invasion of the Body Snatchers has become a true classic, perfectly capturing the Cold War paranoia of the time. The 40s and 50s produced many great creature and monster films, but the mind-controlling aliens in this movie are reflecting society's very valid fears of nuclear threat and unprecedented scientific development that became a reality in the Cold War.
My father.
That must be what he was doing in the cellar last night, placing one of these.
Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho changed the face of horror movies worldwide. Here you see a major shift from monster movies to slasher movies, where the monster is no longer a fictional vampire zombie, but is now a human being. The scare factor of this movie is amplified by the fact that it was based off a true story of a serial killer named Ed Gein. It is important to document this shift in a horror movie antagonist because it shows the rise of media beginning to explore human capacity for evil.
In Rosemary's Baby, gender roles are an extremely prevalent part of the plot. The entirety of the movie, Rosemary's Baby, is reliant on her total obedience to her husband, and through this she is tricked into having the baby of Satan. In the same year, Executive Order 1135 was expanded upon by President Lyndon Johnson, which covered discrimination based on gender. This historical parallel is another representation of art in horror movies.
The Exorcist follows in the footsteps of Psycho and continues to explore the human capacity for evil. Rather than recoil in terror, the director said, he wants the viewer to think hard about the nature of evil and its existence in a world where men also believe in an all-loving and supreme being. This theme of exploring the human mind and what it is capable of is a time capsule of sorts and in the important introspection that occurred in the 60s and 70s and how society changed in its time.
Almighty Lord, Word of God the Father, Jesus Christ.
The cult classic A Nightmare on Elm Street was one of the first horror movie films in history to have a female lead who survives the entire movie. This is an exemplification of the changing gender stereotypes at this time in the 1980s, and how women were beginning to be displayed as braver and more powerful in popular media and in the cinema.
As we approach to the turn of the century, development of technology and widespread social media resulted in found footage films like Paranormal Activity and The Blair Witch Project. Low-budget films that found great successes in the media, shot to look like they were filmed through cell phones or low-quality cameras. This creates an accurate snapshot of today's young generations and makes the scare seem much more real to the viewer, as nowadays much of what we view is through a screen anyways.
So, why should you be interested if you're not a horror movie fan? How is this even related to the humanities? Well, the lesson of this project is that art can be found in the most unexpected of places, if you only take the time to look. Although an important aspect of art is how it reflects its time period and how that changes with time, what is more significant is what doesn't change, what is universal for all time. That is what makes it art rather than something popular.
Horror films are just that. The monsters are created as a representation of their time, but the fear stays the same. Humanity is unified by a common theme for all time, and that is not only fear, but hope. Hope of finally getting rid of the monster under your bed, of killing demons and defeating the ghosts. It's hope of not being scared anymore. All of humanity has fear, but only few can overcome it. Horror movies are so important to the humanities because of how important an understanding of human emotion is, and by understanding how to defeat the monster within all of us.